Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell Matthews here, and I have an update for you on the EI extension as well as the CRB extension. You see, recently the first debate on the EI legislation in the House of Commons just went down, and I'm going to bring you all the most important bits right here. For the EI extension, it seems that most of the major political parties have some support for this bill, but each and every single one of these has a problem with some aspect of it or some aspect of the way it's being rolled out, and as a result, it could be delayed in the House of Commons. Now, when it comes to the CRB, the Employment Minister Carla Qualtrough made some assurances that should have you, if you're waiting for a CRB extension, feeling a little bit more comfortable. So since I just finished watching this 2.5-hour debate, I'm going to bring you all the most important points, and by the end of the video, you're going to have a better idea of the CRB extension and how likely the EI extension is to actually be passed through and whether or not you'll see an interruption in your benefits. So let's get started. But before we do, make sure to check out the links in the description where you can open up your own investment account and take your wealth into your own hands. And let's face it, that's something we all need right about now. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and let's take a look at this. So we'll start here with some statements from Carla Qualtrough. Remember, this is the employment minister for the Liberal government. She just went through a little bit of a speech here talking about what these program changes would look like and how they'd benefit Canadians. But here she's going to make a statement that should give you a little bit of assurance for CRB and may make you a little worried if you're on EI. Let's listen in.
To be clear, Canadians receiving recovery benefits will not see any disruptions in their benefits. But I can't make the same guarantee with respect to Canadians on EI who face the same pending end to their benefits. It's up to this House to ensure that Canadians on EI do not face a benefit disruption. If
you've been following along here on the channel, that won't come as a surprise to you. Remember, they announced that the CRB, CRCB, CRSB, those would be able to be extended via regulation, something they didn't need to pass through the House of Commons. So again, she's reassuring people that this is going to happen. Although the CRA's website isn't updated with this additional information and it has people questioning why this is the case, it seems that she's giving additional assurances that there will be no interruption between the end of your benefits at the end of March for CRB. If you've been applying since the beginning, you should be able to get those additional 3 months without any interruption. But she does mention here that for the EI program, it needs to pass through the House of Commons and through this debate, and there has to be a vote, it has to go to committee. These are all the barriers that we need to hop over in order to make this EI extension a reality.
The bill has been in the hands of all members since February 23rd. All parties have said that the bill is straightforward and necessary. I'm happy to join this debate, and I look forward to moving it to committee swiftly for examination and further review. I urge all parties to move this bill along as quickly as possible.
So she's further emphasizing here the importance for the House of Commons to work together in order to get this legislation passed. However, they're going to receive the same criticism that they received back when they were bringing the CRB bill through the House of Commons in order to get that initially passed. You see, all of the other political parties have had questions as to why the Liberals are bringing these bills so last minute when it comes to these deadlines for people's benefits. How come they haven't been brought to them sooner? And how come they're only having this short amount of time for debate on these measures while other measures are spent a lot more time debating them before they're actually passed through?
Now, the original bill was to provide that 6 months or 26 weeks of coverage, which would come to end of March, as she mentioned. So my question is, we knew the second wave was coming. We knew there would be labor market devastation from that second wave. She mentioned she provided this to us at the end of February. Why not sooner? Why not at the end of January?
Madam Speaker, we believe we've given sufficient time. We've been very clear with our intention to continue to support Canadians along this journey, and I just hope the member is with me on the necessity to pass this legislation quickly. With 11 clauses, I'm sure we can do this together.
So we see that criticism falling heavily right here. How come you didn't bring this to us sooner? You are actually the one who's putting people's benefits at risk by not bringing it sooner. Now, Carla Qualtrough responds to that, saying, we believe that we gave you adequate time. You've had a month to look at the bill. What more do you need than that? But the Conservatives' problem with the amount of time they're given to debate these bills isn't unwarranted entirely, because you see, when they brought the CRB bill into existence, they rushed this through after the Liberal government had paused Parliament for an extended amount of time, and then as soon as they were back, they gave them this bill and said, we need to rush this through, otherwise people are going to have no money, they're not going to have any benefits, benefits, let's just pass this through. Now, when they did pass through that initial CRB bill, there were some loopholes like with the CRSB, the sickness benefit, that allowed people to go on a vacation and come back and receive money for quarantining after going on an out-of-country vacation. Now, the Conservatives are saying, hey, if we didn't rush through that bill and you actually gave us enough time to look for all these loopholes, we wouldn't have run into that problem. And now you're doing the exact same thing here with this EI extension.
And after a year, the government's only plan thus far is to further extend emergency supports. And so my issue with Bill C-24 is that it is not a jobs recovery plan. It is yet another Band-Aid. And the Prime Minister recently promised in the House of Commons that the government would, quote, bring back opportunities.
So this is the other major problem that the Conservatives have with the bill. The fact that it's just another Band-Aid on a potentially bigger problem in their eyes. The fact that we don't have a plan going forward for when the economy is going to reopen, when we can supply jobs, what's going to happen after the end of September when all these benefits run out. How are we going to sort of transition people off of these benefits? Are we going to try to restructure things so some people can remain on benefits? The Conservatives are seemingly open to having discussions about potential programs in the future, but they want some clarity on what the plan is going forward. But the Liberals were frustrated with the fact that this discussion was going on during this debate, saying that maybe they should be focused more on just passing this legislation rather than criticizing what the legislation should have been.
The question I have for the member is, does she actually support the legislation? This legislation is there to support a great number of Canadians. We just witnessed the Conservatives voting against support packages in C-14. Does the Conservative Party support this legislation? And if they do support the legislation, will they recognize the urgency and start allowing government bills to pass?
So essentially, the Liberals are saying, hey, you haven't given us a clear answer. Are you going to support this bill when we take it to a vote in the future? Or are you going to delay things further and want more and further debate on this? Or are you going to recognize the fact that it needs to be passed quickly? Otherwise, people are not going to be able to continue receiving their EI. He also brings up how in his eyes and in the Liberal government's eyes, the Conservatives have been delaying things and making it slower to get bills passed through, making reference to the bill that was voted on earlier in the day that would see some policies implemented that were introduced in the fall economic plan, chief among which is the $1,200 Canada Child Benefit upgrade. But despite the Liberals asking the Conservatives flat out, will you support this bill or not? Are we going to be able to take this to a vote? The Conservatives didn't really give them a straightforward answer on whether or not they'd support it. It seems they recognize the importance of passing something to solve this EI problem, but they're saying, hey, the way the government's done this is unacceptable. They're bringing it to us way too late, not giving us enough time to make sure that everything is up to snuff when it comes to passing the bill, and there's tons of other problems that they haven't given us plans on. So why is there this change in priority? You need to push through this bill very quickly, but we haven't seen any updates on other more fiscal side of things. It's a big mess. So to clarify, the Conservatives didn't give a yes or no answer as to whether or not they're going to vote in favor of this bill if there is a vote called. But two other parties did give a straightforward answer, and they both said that they would support this bill when it comes to a vote, but they have problems with the bill, and again, the same problems the Conservatives have with many of the ways that the Liberal government is handling their government and the way they're bringing these bills forward. They have big problems with this, but they recognize that they're stuck between a rock and a hard place with this EI problem and likely will support it. That's the NDP and the Bloc Québécois. They both have major problems. Let's touch on them a little bit because they may be debated more in the future, and this could cause things to be delayed more when it comes to actually getting this through to a vote and then passed on to committee, which is the next step, and then eventually through to the Senate, and then making this legislation official so that you can know that your EI benefits won't end.
And the point is to protect workers who lose their jobs. And since the EI system was implemented at the beginning of the 1970s, the protection it affords has shrunk rather than expanded. As it now stands, the EI system is not adapted to the reality of today's labor market, and even less in a period of crisis, because workers are falling through the cracks.
So this is one of the Bloc Québécois' main problems with the legislation, the fact that it's not doing more to overhaul the EI system. They're saying, hey, this program is not suited for today's modern economy. There's gig workers, so many people are self-employed. The typical 9-to-5 work week is disappearing for many Canadians, Canadians, and we don't have systems that support this changing reality. Our support systems don't do a good enough job of creating a safety net for all people in Canada. Another issue that parties have with this bill, and this is something that both the Bloc Québécois and the NDP are together on, is the fact that it doesn't do anything to extend EI sickness benefits. Now, I know when I announced the EI extension or brought that information to you on the channel here, lots of people commented saying, hey, how come they're not extending this EI sickness benefit as well? And it seems like there's broad support from every single political party for this EI sickness extension to be brought forward. And it was actually before the coronavirus pandemic that it was clear that they were going to extend these sickness benefits. Everybody wanted that to happen, but they're saying, how come that's not happening now? You could be doing it in the very same legislation. Why are you delaying this? Why are you holding back? Are you holding this promise so that you can campaign on it again, just like you did last time? These are some of the criticisms that the Liberal government is facing.
I'm going to be honest with you, Madam Speaker. I was a little frustrated and in fact outraged by some comments from the Minister for Employment, Workforce Development, and her parliamentary secretary. They're not able to look for work because they go through periodic episodes of chronic fatigue and other symptoms. It's occurring often enough that they know they're not going to be able to hold down a job. Their EI sickness benefit is done. There's no other program. They don't have the resources that they need. Well, they said simple reforms and urgent reforms. There's nothing more simple than changing the number of benefit weeks in the Employment Insurance Act. You change a 15 to a 50, and it's done. You couldn't ask for a more simple legislative reform if you tried. There's absolutely no good reason whatsoever to have omitted this.
So here we see this MP Daniel Blakey for the NDP getting rather heated about the fact that the Liberal government hasn't included this sickness benefit extension inside the same legislation, saying, hey, this is just as urgent. How come you're not including this in this same very related bill? And we're going to have to go through this whole legislative process again to make that change? Why are you delaying this? Why are you having these problems inside of your legislation when we could pass this through very easily? The entire House of Commons, every single party supports an extension of these sickness benefits. How come you're not doing it? He even goes so far as to mention that the Liberals campaigned on the fact that they were going to extend this to 26 weeks. Now the NDP is calling for this extension to be up to 50 weeks for this sickness benefit, but he's saying, hey, you even committed to doing this in your election. How come you're not doing this right now when it's such a necessary thing that needs to be done? Now the Liberals replied to this saying that it seems like more and more they're believing that provinces should be the ones to actually provide these sick benefits for many workers because of the way that people qualify for these sick benefits, but it really was not sufficient of an answer to really answer this question that he put out. The Liberals responded to all of this by pointing out that the Conservatives were delaying various bills, delaying this bill, and saying, hey, you're playing political games. It's not our fault that these things are taking a long time to get through legislation and support is being slowed down for Canadians.
The truth is that whether it's stalling on points of order or putting up various different roadblocks, it's quite clear that the Conservatives are interested in slowing down the legislative process as much as they possibly can.
Now, the Conservatives countered this by saying, hey, if you wanted this to pass so quickly, why didn't you call a vote in this debate? We actually got all the way to the end of the debate without a vote being called, and the Liberals accounted for some of that time that was spent debating instead of voting. At least that's what the Conservatives said. Liberals said, hey, we didn't believe that we'd get the support in order to pass it unless we pushed this on to another day and debated it. So we don't know right now when this debate is going to be continued. It's definitely not in the next few days as of the parliamentary calendar right now, at least the one I have access to, but we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen when a vote is called. It certainly seems that the NDP, the Green Party, the Bloc Québécois, and the Liberals are all in support of this bill and will pass it if there's a vote called. So it's a little bit curious why they didn't just call a vote this time, because it was clear that the Liberals and those other parties would have enough support to pass it through because they only need a majority vote to get this bill passed, and the Conservatives would be the only ones voting against it, and they didn't even say that they certainly wouldn't vote for it. So it's a little bit curious why they didn't call a vote initially now, but now we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to find out whether or not this is actually going to be passed. But that's all of the most important points from that debate that was just held. I watched through the whole 2 hours and a half and tried to clip it down to the most important parts for you. We're going to have to wait and see what happens. Every single party has problems with the bill, problems with the way the Liberal governments handled this. So it's not only on the Conservatives for delaying this to be passed through. It seems like there are legitimate concerns about the way the government is handling the way they're bringing bills forward. But again, we're going to have to wait and see how this pans out. And I'm going to let you know right here on the channel as soon as we have any more information. And if you found this information helpful in these breakdowns of these long debates, then it's likely that someone else that you know might find them helpful too. Feel free to share this video. It would be a huge help to supporting this channel and keeping this going so that I can keep on bringing you guys this sort of content. And make sure to check out the links in the description where you can open up your own investing accounts and take your wealth into your own hands. It seems we can't rely on the government in a lot of cases to help us with our finances, so I think that's something that we all need to start learning a little bit more about so that we can take it into our own hands. And of course, if you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, all of those good buttons down there. I hope this video has helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time. This channel is supported by viewers like you. Thanks, channel members.